Okay, so we're now recording. So if I can just do a quick roll call for the benefit of Julie, who's doing the minutes. I make it that we've got councillors Colbran, Spencer, Drake, Evans, Harries, Hodgins, Hussey, Smith and White. We also have observing Councillor Tudor Davis, Councillor Steve Bradwick. We've got Steen Goulet of Internal Audit and Alison from Wales Audit Office. So we're only missing Councillor Ibrahim.
Right.
Who may join at some point.
Right then. So if you use our item on the agenda as item whatever, apologies, at the moment we've only got, well, we don't know about Councillor Ibrahim, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'll keep an eye out.
Right, we'll leave it at that. All right, so that's item one done. When do we come into that stuff? If we look at item 2 then, the declarations of interest, if members have got any interest at all, personal or verbal, can they please tell anybody whether they can tell Sally now or respond later, Sal? Or?
No, can they tell me now, please?
Yeah.
Yes. I'd like some clarification. We've got a
Sorry, can I ask who's speaking? I can't see who's speaking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Hodgins in Brynmawr.
Morning.
Hi, how are you? I just want some clarification, really, on the declaration of interest. I've got a small transport company, and I have transported some equipment into the new training centre, so at Cardiff Gate. So I just wondered,
Right, so you're one of our suppliers, are you?
No, a contract. The supplier is based in Brynmawr, in Blaen y Gwent, and we then transport some of his items to various locations, or including some of the South Wales Fire Authority locations.
Okay. I suspect it's not going to impact on any items on the agenda.
No.
But what you will need to do is register with Geraint, who's our head of finance, so that he can include that as well. And I'm assuming, have you put that on your declarations of interest form?
It didn't crop up. I didn't put it on at the point of time because I hadn't thought about it, to be frank with you. But when we were approached last week, it's only ad hoc. It could be once a year. We was approached last week to send a quotation out. And I thought, hang on. It rang a bell, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So, we may not get the work anyway, but then if we did, we wanted to be crystal clear. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. I'll make sure that that's added to your declaration of interest form, and perhaps Geraint will send you the declaration form from the finance perspective.
Okay, but obviously we don't get paid from the fire authority. We get paid from the third-party supplier, which is the contract between you and them. You know what I mean?
So it'll only be relevant if we're discussing any contracts where you might be subcontracted to deal with.
That's fine. Yep, that's excellent. That's not an issue.
Right. Any other member got anything they'd like to raise?
Okay, thank you.
Just one thing. Councillor Abraham has just sent his apologies for the minutes for the meeting this morning.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks for that.
Okay, just email has just come through.
Right, that's brilliant. Thanks for that. Right.
And Councillor White's waving as well.
Yeah.
This is the usual declaration with regard to non-personal, non-beneficial interest, each agenda item that affects my authority. Just the usual.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear.
The personal or non-beneficial interest, each agenda item that affects my authority.
Yes, we automatically include as a personal interest any item which has an impact back on the Home Authority, because every member contributes towards the authority's budget. Following discussions with the Ombudsman several years ago, it was agreed that we would just enter a general declaration for all agenda items that had an impact back on the Home Authority, because you're only here by virtue of your Home Authority, and otherwise we wouldn't be able to conduct any business.
There we are. Is everybody happy with all that? If so, then we'll move on to item 3 then. The chairperson's announcement. I've got no announcements at all to declare. So if we move on to item 4 then, to receive the minute of the Finance Audit and Performance Management meeting held on the 2nd of March 2020, page 3. So if I go page by page, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7, and also page 8. Is there anything anybody would like to raise regarding them minutes?
I would Chair, like to move the minutes.
Anybody?
Sorry, who was that moving the minutes?
Councillor.
I'll move the minutes.
Councillor Hussey moving.
Anybody second?
I'll second that. Councillor Drake will second it.
Thank you.
Is everybody happy? There's nothing anybody does want to raise now before we move on?
Yep.
Right. So, if we move on to item 5 then, the revenue outturn 2019-2020, and that's on page 9.
I'll take that one, Chair.
Yeah, would you like to take that?
Morning, members.
Morning.
The revenue outturn position is the report on the unaudited sort of outturn for the end of the financial year. It's an update on the revenue monitoring reports the members will have received throughout every committee throughout the year. The usual format, Appendix 1 gives a subjective breakdown on the unders and overs against each area within the budget. Appendix 2 tracks the variances that have been reported through the committee throughout the year. Appendix 3 gives the update then on the impact on the reserve position. And Appendix 4 gives the overview of the grant position, each of the grants that we reported. The overall position for the year, back in March, the forecast at that point reported to the committee was a projected overspend of 453,000. Following all the year-end procedures that have gone through, the final position that we're reporting now today is that the forecast is that there's a £47,000 overspend for the year. So the overall overspend has dropped significantly. Throughout the report, there's sort of various ups and downs that are reported. I'd just like to sort of bring the attention to some of the main points in the report. Some of the increases for employee costs are in relation to ill health retirement, so that's pushed costs up there. In terms of premises, we report in £74,000 of additional energy costs for the year. However, we are anticipating getting those back as credits within the current financial year because they are based on estimated positions, not on actual readings. Some of the areas across the board, obviously, spend has been less than anticipated, and training one of those where non-delivery of courses so the actual volume of courses was reduced at the back end of the year, obviously as a result of the COVID outbreak, and that's similar across some of the areas. In terms of transport, there was some adjustment to the costs there because of fuel stocks held at the year end, and that's a year end financial adjustment that happens when we do stock positions at the end of each year. The biggest impact really on the revenue outturn position, and this has been sort of reported to members throughout the year, is in terms of supplies costs. The actual amount that we spend on home fire safety equipment, we always know that we're going to overspend throughout the year. And that's a decision that's been taken by the authority to support for a number of years now, where the grant position comes in from Welsh Government, sort of is way below what our anticipated activity level is in that area. But with the support of the authority, we continue with our previous activity in distributing home safety equipment to the citizens of South Wales. But as reported, the other two fire and rescue services in Wales are traditionally underspent in this area. And so when the overall grant position for Wales is calculated at the year end, they tend to, the Welsh Government will support then our overspend from the other spends in the other two areas. And that's been the same case this year. So whilst we overspent by £260,000 on equipment, we did get the money in for the grant at the year end, which is probably the biggest reason then for reducing the level of overspend previously reported. There was also some adjustments for uniform costs, again year-end adjustments for stock position, and that was based on the returned equipment and items that we'd had from retirees and people who'd left the service during the year. And finally, then again, there was additional income received late in the year in relation to our joint control centre, some refunds for electricity charges and for contributions from Westville Barry Fire Station. So overall, that left us with a position of a £47,000 overspend for the year, which is pretty close to the sort of the balanced budget position. At that point, I'd take any questions before I move on to the impact on the reserves position, if that's okay, Chair.
I'll unmute members as they want to ask a question. I muted you all during Geraint's presentation because there was quite a bit of background noise with papers rustling. So, Councillor Steve Evans has indicated.
Yeah. All I would say is, with it being no budget by 6,000, that should reduce with the energy efficiency money we should be getting back. So I just mean that the total overall would be less again anyway because of that.
Yeah, Jay, if we'd have had those, the reduced costs there, if we'd have had the credits back as anticipated, we would have been either bang on budget or slightly underspent. So, so very, very good sort of position to report as a close out to.
Pick that up, Yeah. Thanks for that. From anybody else? Or?
Councillor Hudgens, bear with me while I just unmute you. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, obviously, so just an observation. You mentioned the overspend on home fire safety, but I was speaking to one of your colleagues earlier on this morning, sort of Dewi Jones, and he said that it's proved dividends because the calls, whether you mentioned Blaine or Gwent or across the whole service, are down by 32%. So it proves that the educational and the impact that project of work is having is beneficial, isn't it? So
that's why a number of years ago, when Welsh Government cut our grant funding position by 50% overnight, a very short notice, we just had a letter to say they were cutting the budget by 50%. The service and with support of members, we're adamant that we'd continue with our activity level. We weren't going to reduce just because the grant funding had reduced. So and that's why every year we report the overspend. But fortunately, every year to date, we've managed to recoup that overspend from underspends in the other two services.
But I think the point I was trying to make was that it's a justifiable overspend, isn't it? For home safety, do you know what I mean? And it's reaping rewards when you see the number of home fire calls are down by 32%, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't think anyone could be critical of that level of work, could they?
No, and that's why we appreciate the support of members to allow us to continue with that activity level.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Has anybody else got any?
I think Tudor has. Bear with me. Let me unmute you. There you are.
Wayne, just going to reflect on that 52% reduction meant we had 400,000 revenue and 200,000 on capital taken away from us. And the following year, another 80,000.
It's incredible.
Steve, I think you need to unmute yourself. There we are.
I'm just waiting to finish to make sure nobody responded. The next person was Val, Sal, or?
Well, it was only a comment, actually. I have a smile. The covering paragraphs to the reports, which are very interesting. They're good. 227, the finding of the 7 years sort of of paid, which we were getting a rebate on. What do we get it back? 43k. That's a nice surprise. But the amount of work that goes into these documents, I do compliment the officers on, and I find it very interesting to read. But
thanks for that, Val. You know, it's an important point to show how much work goes into these reports and how much work the staff do. And I think it's tremendous. Anyway.
yeah, well, this one is a concise report, if you like. When you get into the really big report, the information in there is amazing. The only thing is it gets me quite fudged mentally by the end of it, Chairman. I've got questions in my mind, but by the end of it, I've lost them. One thing I would like to know, regarding energy costs, and I don't know if it relates to this item or the next or whatever, we started to monitor the cost of heating at the stations. So it's automatically done now, isn't it? It's automatically recorded elsewhere. How much of the savings has that contributed, please? I mean, I know that we've put panels on buildings, and that obviously contributes, but the energy saving with heating, what's the equation for that, please?
In terms of the station savings, we haven't actually recouped any of the savings as yet, or haven't done the calculations as such. The example I can give, though, is that from the LED lighting that we installed in headquarters, just on the installation of that alone, it cost us approximately £80,000 to install, but we were saving about £50,000 a year on energy costs just on headquarters. And that's why we've been rolling that out across all of our stations, and that's only just sort of now coming to an end, the installation across all of our sites. So we won't really see the savings now until the current financial year. But I can certainly report that back once we
aware of solar panels.
Well, did you want to come back in? Yeah.
Yes, please, if I may. Aware of the savings from the solar panels, that one had registered with me. It was the monitoring of the boilers and the heating systems within our stations, which we now record centrally or control centrally. How much has that actually contributed?
I think there's boiler management systems, Geraint.
Yeah, thank you.
It's part of the same project. So in the next report, in the capital report, you'll see the costs that have been invested into energy efficiency schemes. So we're only now sort of finalising the actual installation of those schemes. So the savings won't be derived until this financial year.
So it's ongoing then, really, you think? Yeah. It's ongoing.
So now we'll start to see the benefits of it, really.
Yeah. Right. Thank you very much, Geraint.
Thank you, Val. Does anybody else would like to raise any questions to Geraint? No? No. Quiet.
Can I just draw members' attention to Appendix 3, which sets out the reserves position for the authority. And that really shows that during the year, the movements in the reserves and the overall position has dropped from 16.3 million to 12.4 million, and that's as a result of spend in different areas such as the CFBT facility, RFP, vehicles, the relocation of occupational health, and the investment in energy efficiency schemes. So the overall position there, as I say, it shows that the reserves are earmarked for specific purposes and are being invested in those schemes that members have approved. And then coming on to sort of the final recommendation for the report, where it says for the report to be noted, it's just really for members to be aware and approve that we've actually drawn from the reserves the £47,000 overspend has actually been drawn from the change management reserve.
Thanks for that, Geraint. If everybody's happy and there's no more questions, the recommendation is the outturn position and the net revenue deficit and use of usable reserves are received and noted. Is everybody happy with the recommendation?
Steve, sorry, can I I'm going to have to go through it individually because I can't see all of the members because some have their cameras off, which is fine. So if I unmute everybody and if we can have someone to move, someone to second, and then I'll go through each member in turn to see whether they're in favour or not of the recommendation.
Yes, I'll move it.
Okay, so that was Councillor Colbrand moving.
Councillor Drake will second.
Thank you. And if I go through alphabetically, Councillor Colbrand, if you can say whether you're in favour, against or abstain, please.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Drake.
In favour.
Councillor Evans.
In favour.
Councillor Harries.
In favour.
Councillor Hodgins.
In favour.
Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Spencer.
Yes, in favour.
And Councillor White. Councillor White. Councillor White.
Don't get one.
Where's he gone?
In favour.
Councillor White.
In favour.
In favour. Thank you.
I didn't know you were phoning a friend.
That's unanimous.
Well, thank you, everyone, anyway. That was unanimous. Right then, if we move on to the next item, item 6, send the capital outturn 2019-2020. Is that your Alan?
Yeah, I'll take
Karen, bear with me. I'm going to mute everybody a minute. There we are.
Thanks, Chair. Again, similar format. It's just the capital outturn, again, an audited position, but it's the update on the position that's been reported to the committee throughout the year. The final position reporting today is that there was a £6.6 million spend against the overall budget for the year of £9.7 million, and there's £3.4 million worth of slippage being carried forward into 2021 financial year. Appendix 1 of the report sets out the detail of the capital programme and the spend, the budget position and spend against each of the items within the programme. Table 2.2 on page 26 of the papers again sets out a bit more detail in terms of the breakdown of the budget and the potential of the actual the way that we plan to fund the budget at the start of the financial year, and it gives the actual position then of what was spent, and then the actual funding mechanism that we use to fund the capital programme throughout the year at the end of the financial year. So it shows the 9.7 million budget and the 6.6 million spend, and how that was financed using a mix of borrowing, revenue contributions, revenue reserves, grant funding, and the capital receipts. So that gives it the detail of how we finance a typical programme. There was one typo I just wanted to point out in the report as well. It says that budget slippage carried forward to 1920. That should read 2021 in paragraph 2.3. The detail of the report, I won't cover off too much of the detail, other than to say that a lot of the capital programme was impacted at the back end of the year, again, as a result of the COVID outbreak. So some of the delays that were inevitable there, mainly for the property side on Pontypridd Fire Station, the refurbishment that was going ahead there had to be delayed and contractors were removed from site. Vehicle deliveries that were expected at the back end of March, they were unable to be delivered. So again, delays there and slipped forward. And the only other sort of major amount really to draw attention to in terms of the equipment was the variance on the breathing apparatus project. Following decisions and reports to members throughout the year, the final decision was that this would be done in-house, and has resulted in the actual project and the spending by 64,000. But again, that's been reported in detail to members at each committee. So yeah, there was some overspends that show in the report, and these are unbudgeted projects that were approved by members during the year, such as the occupational health relocation. So they show as overspends, but there was just that there was no original budget there for them, but members give approval for those to be added to the capital programme during the year. And some of the others are things like grant funding schemes where they've been added in, which wouldn't have been done necessarily at the start of the year. They've been added in because of grant funding becoming available. So they're offset with the grant income coming in. So I think that's all really I want to cover off in the report, so happy to take any questions.
The first thing is, I know you said there was an increase with the slippage because of the COVID-19, but will that affect it further on towards the end of the year with actually more slippage because any of these vehicles or any other services may be even more further delayed, so therefore making the actual figures higher towards the end of the year?
So towards the end of this current year now, or
current year, yeah. It might give a slippage to go over into the following year.
Yeah, that's one thing we've always got to be mindful of, I suppose, and is monitoring that on a regular basis now to see what the impact is. Obviously, whatever the position is, that'll be reported to members in the capital monitoring reports, which we'll report to future committees then. So it's something we certainly update you on each time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor White has indicated.
Right,
You'll have to unmute yourself, that's it.
Cheers, thank you, Sally. In regards to the delivery of these vehicles, are they with us at the moment or are they still delayed?
The majority are still delayed.
What's the reason for that? What's the reason of delay? And is it affecting the service we provide?
It's certainly not affecting the service because we got vehicles as they're part of replacement programs. So it just means we're extending the life of some of the other vehicles. I think it's just delays from the suppliers now. I think as things are starting to get back up and running, we'll slowly start to see them coming in the coming weeks. But as of yet, they're still delayed.
Come back. We find just vehicles by saying because they're specialist vehicles, it's not a thing you can just pull off the shelf. They're specially made. So if people are not in work, there are going to be delays because they are that type of vehicle. They're not run-of-the-mill things.
I can't see any other members.
No, and no one else?
Indicating.
No. Well, if we go to the recommendation, if there's no other questions then, and we do what we've done before with Sally asking everyone. The recommendation that members note the progress of the capital schemes, approve alterations identified in Appendix 1, and note the associated funding streams. Are we happy with that, everyone? So I'll leave that to Sally now.
Is someone moving the recommendation? Councillor Harries.
I'll second it, Councillor White.
Someone seconding?
I'll second it, Councillor White.
Councillor White. Okay, so again, if you're in favour, against or abstain, Councillor Colbrand.
In favour.
Councillor Drake.
In favour.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Harries.
In favour.
Councillor Hodgins.
Favour.
Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Spencer.
For.
Councillor White.
In favour.
Again, unanimous. Thank you.
Well, thanks for everybody for that one. Right. If we move on to item 7 then, which is the statement of account 2019-2020, and that's page 33. Is that yours, Chris, or is it still going?
That'll be me.
Yeah.
Chris, wait while I mute people a minute.
Okay, everybody muted?
Yeah.
Just as well, I thought the clock was going to strike 13 o'clock just before we did the accounts there. Okay, these are the draft accounts signed off by myself at the 31st of May. Obviously, they're subject to the audit process now, there's a couple of appendices attached to the back of the accounts, which are letters from WAO. WAO are on the call today, obviously, and they'll be making some comment in due course regarding the specifics of those letters. There's obviously been some challenge because of the COVID situation in preparing the accounts, and that's one of the subjects of the letters in terms of potential delays to the process. It's probably a tribute to the team members, really, that despite the COVID crisis and an awful lot of staff working from home and putting an awful lot of effort in to actually complete the process as normal, we've actually managed to achieve the deadline as originally planned. So that's sort of good news, but obviously we've still got half the process to go in terms of the audit itself. Councillor Val Smith mentioned fudge. It's obviously a very long document, a very technical document, and some of the requirements of the accounting codes in terms of the International Financial Reporting Standards and associated standards we have to comply with are not really easily transportable into the public sector, but we have to follow the approved codes and we have to develop the document in accordance with the required standards. So perhaps that's the reason for some of the fudge. And I certainly didn't want to go into a lot of the detail of some of the statements, which obviously pick up those standards and explain them in the context of the financial background to the authority and the way we have to demonstrate them. What I do want to do is just, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to try and share my screen with members just to pick up a couple of the key tables from the document. I'm hoping this is going to work. I'm hoping this is going to work, he said. That's not the one. I don't want to do that. I don't know why my screen has decided to not play ball now. Here we go. Can members see that now? You should hopefully be seeing a presentation.
You can see it.
Sorry?
Yes, you can see it.
Okay. You should hopefully be seeing a couple of screens of presentation here now. The first is the summary on page 37 of your agenda. It just reiterates really the figures that Geraint has run through on the revenue outturn position. So it just shows the surplus deficit for the year in a little more detail, and hopefully gives members the reassurance that actually the figures that Geraint has just presented to you actually exist within the statement of accounts as well. It's exactly the same outturn figures, just obviously in a lot more detail and a lot more technical format, but it is the same outturn position. The second one I wanted to pick up was note 18 to the accounts, and that's actually on page 90 on your agenda. And again, that usable reserves note within the document actually picks up the same figures that Geraint has just been through on the outturn report for the revenue. So again, it just shows you that the figures pass through the document and arrive into the statement of accounts. The only last item I wanted to pick up really, and this will come on to I think some commentary in the audit letters as well that follow. We've had to undertake revaluation of the fixed assets of the authority this year, a full revaluation. And you'll find on page 85 of the document, there's a note 10, which just sets out the plant, property and equipment and intangible assets of the authority in terms of valuations. You see there's a net book value of about £82 million worth of assets within the accounts, of which 62 million is land and buildings, and the other 14 million odd is vehicles. Those are the biggest items, and they obviously relate back to some of the capital program items that Geraint has just outlined. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that. So that's just really a reassurance that the draft accounts documents actually reflect the outturn reports that Geraint has just outlined. In terms of the letters that follow, there are a number of risks identified by the auditors, and I'm sure Alison or Nick or whoever's going to do it will talk to those in a minute. Some of those related to the timing of the document. Hopefully we've addressed that in terms of finalising our part of the process. We haven't imposed any significant policy or other changes in order to achieve those deadlines, and I hope that it's correct that we haven't really extended the use of estimates or sort of guesstimates in terms of the preparation of the accounts. We have followed the same process as normal in terms of preparation. So obviously we'll see the outcome of that at audit when the process is completed. That's all I want to say on the accounts document itself. Perhaps, Chair, if you want to, I'll invite Alison and Nick to go through the associated documents, if they are still there, that is.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, do that, Chris, if it helps. Yeah.
Alison, Nick, are you still online?
They've left you high and dry.
Yeah.
Ah, there you go.
Well, we can't use them then.
Unmute yourself, Al.
Sorry, I am not muted now, am I? Just to say, Chris, if I use the term fudge, it wasn't a criticism of your systems there. It's just by the time I get to the end of these documents, it's me that's fudged completely and utterly, all right? But then, as you talk through a document, things pull together. So I thank you. And the amount of work, as I say, that goes into this thing here, yeah, you earn your keep. So this is the fudge at this end, not your end, all right?
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you for that. Alison, can you hear us? You need to unmute yourself, Al. You haven't. Hang on a sec, Al. You still. We've lost Sally as well at the moment, so I'm not sure where Sally's gone.
Steve, can I ask you a question a second?
Yeah, just bear with us a second, Wayne, because we've lost Sally as well at the moment, so I'm not quite sure.
Does Wayne want to come in and ask you a question while we're waiting, Chris? Or
Yes, please. Is that okay, Steve? Can I ask?
Yeah, well, ask him while we're waiting, then we come back and you might as well ask a question.
Okay.
On the first sort of review of the figures you put up, so can you sort of flip it up again? Because I noticed that you hadn't included the sort of slippage in it. The slippage line was completely blank. How have they been put in at the end of the year?
Hold on a second. Bear with me. Which figures are we talking about? Sorry.
You got capital included in the slippage. It hasn't been put in there, has it? And you know you've got a significant variance now, haven't you, with the situation?
Yeah, sorry. The statement of accounts themselves only actually, so these figures down in the bottom here, only actually shows the expenditure and income. It doesn't actually pick up the slippage. That's a process which we use internally for the capital program. So you'll obviously see that spend coming through in next financial year. It doesn't actually go up on that statement there, but I can assure you it will be reflected in next year's capital program.
Chris.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Where it says capital including slippage, what that refers to is the slippage brought forward from the previous year to make up the £9.7 million budget.
Yeah.
The actual approved budget was 6.3 million, and there was 3.3 million of slippage brought forward from 18-19. So that makes up the 9.7 million budget on that line then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to ask anything to Chris now while he's here? Or so? What are you going to do now, Chris? Should we move forward?
We'll try and get Alison online now. Sally's back.
Alison there. Let me just find on here. There we are. Alison's unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I thought I was doing something wrong then.
No, sorry. My internet just died for a minute.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Sally. Thanks, Chair. There's two letters from the Auditor General on the agenda today. I'll talk through the first one, which is an update to the audit plan, and then my colleague Nick, who's on the phone line, will hopefully talk to the second letter, which is an update sort of on our wider work. I think Nick is there. If not, I'll cover it off. In terms of the update to the audit plan, members will be aware that we brought the full audit plan to the last FAPM meeting. Obviously, a lot's happened since then, and we've issued an update to the audit plan. It sets out potential audit issues that may arise as a result of COVID-19. Chris mentioned the use of estimates, and well, audit is still underway. We haven't seen any large estimates going in at the moment that we wouldn't expect, so that's probably not going to be an issue. In terms of asset valuations, you've had the 5-yearly asset valuation this year. The valuer has included some disclaimers in their valuation report. They're standard disclaimers around COVID-19. So we need to work through with the accounts team, how those are disclosed, how those disclaimers are disclosed in your accounts and what impact that has on our audit opinion. Also, in terms of pension valuations, particularly in respect of the valuation of investments that go into those calculations. Sometimes the pension actuary will use investment valuations, say around February time. Well, obviously this year there was a huge drop between February and March, so we will be assessing the sort of whether those estimates are still reliable in terms of the pension estimates. In terms of the audit timetable, as Chris mentioned, you've done well. We've got a full set of accounts with us, and the audit is now currently being undertaken, albeit remotely, so very, very different. We had planned to sign off the accounts by the end of July. The plan is to still try and complete the bulk of the work by the end of July, but as you're all aware, members of the public have the right to inspect the accounts and records and ask questions of the auditor. Obviously, with lockdown, members of the public are not able to go into your offices and inspect the accounts, and then they're not able to come in and see us and ask questions. We are looking, all things going well, to set the date for inspection for early September, if possible, but that will, of course, depend on lockdown restrictions being lifted. I think the plan is to complete the audit as planned, as best as we can, and perhaps bring a draft ISA 260 report back to the July FAPM meeting as planned, but then the audit will be concluded probably around September once the inspection members of the public have been given the opportunity to inspect and ask questions. So that was all that I wanted to say, but more than happy to take any questions on the plan.
Yeah, if I could come in with a question. Where you said about the public inspecting the accounts, I mean, in these times, do you think that's unpractical? Because, and we're having to do everything remotely and everything online. I think we're asking the impossible at the moment. So,
yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you. It's just not possible to do that at the moment. I think the earliest, and it's a statutory requirement. It's not something that we impose. It's a statutory requirement. So that statutory requirement still stands. I think we're hopeful that by September there will be an opportunity for members of the public to, inspect.
So following on from that, in September, and we're still in the same scenario where we are now, how will that affect us?
If we're in the same scenario as we are now, then those I guess they would. There's two options, isn't there? We can't sign off the accounts until that inspection period has happened. So that there either has to be some sort of intervention, whereby the legislation is changed. I can't see that happening, or the period of the audit is delayed. The audit certificate is delayed.
It's probably
if I can just help Steve on that, and it may assist Alison, I don't know. Welsh Government, through the coronavirus regulations and the other ancillary legislation that they've issued, they have done, and they've been doing it on a priority basis, some considerable amendments to legislation for a temporary period, one of which, of course, is the ability to have virtual meetings, because of course that wasn't in legislation previously. So potentially Welsh Government could prioritise this as an area where they do want to legislate going forward once they know a bit more, but they may feel the right of the public to inspect is paramount, but they may suggest perhaps online inspection, for example. I don't know. So I think it's a wait and see game.
Thanks for that, Sal. Anyway, David wants to come in now, I think. I got his hand
He does.
Curiosity more than anything. Do we get many members of the public coming in to look at the report? Or do you get many members of the public coming in at all?
At South Wales Fire, I've been on this audit for 5 years and we haven't had any questions. But you know, it's still a right. So even though you might not expect anybody to come in, it's still a right, and you can't bypass it. But at South Wales Fire, last 5 years, no questions. Tends to be at local authority councils more.
Chair, just to say that Alison's right. We've had no people presenting at the door demanding to see documents, etc. Obviously, there are still options for members of the public to approach the auditors to ask questions of the accounts, and I suspect that some sort of hybrid might be the ultimate answer if this does go on longer. But like the rest of you, I hope we're not in this position in a couple of months' time and we can actually facilitate something.
That's great. Thanks for that. Is there anything else you want to add to any of your report, Chris, or has anybody else got any other questions?
I think Alison indicated that Nick may want to come in.
Right, okay then.
To explain something. Did you, Alison?
Yes, Nick, are you there?
He's there on screen, but I can't hear him.
Is he muted, Sal?
He's got his camera off.
I think Nick has joined by telephone. I don't know whether that makes a difference, Sally.
He should be able to. Let me just see if I've got him muted. Hang on. Let me unmute him. That would help.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Nick.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to attend the meeting as well. There was 3 things I wanted to touch on, Chair, very briefly. The first one relates to the annual programme of audit work that Alison's run through in a bit more detail. Just to say that with regards to the performance audit work that we've planned for the year, it's a piece of work that we're planning to roll out across all councils, national parks and the 3 fire and rescue authorities. And that's really looking at how you're approaching resilience in terms of your corporate arrangements, particularly with an eye on recovery planning to understand, I guess, the challenges that the public sector has had to face in the last 3 months and going forward, and to provide some assurance both to each of the organisations directly, but also to this committee, that the staff and the organisation is responding effectively to the coronavirus and is putting in place effective recovery plans which will allow it to maintain its resilience going forward. So that's just summarised very briefly on page 120 in the plan. Then just to update on the second letter, which was in the information pack that you have before you, and that starts on page 127. And that's just to touch on 2 pieces of work that we are currently rolling out and have delivered. One is just to update on the wellbeing of future generations. One of the requirements of the legislation is that we have to produce almost like an end-of-term report on how the 44 public bodies who are charged with responsibility and the act have delivered in the initial phase. So in May, the Auditor General published his report on WFG. It accompanied a report by the Future Generations Commissioner as well. That just gives a position statement on the initial phase of delivering the various pieces of work that the 44 bodies are responsible for. So that's just to sort of update that that's been published in May, and it was a requirement of the Act, as I say. And then the second one, which is probably of more relevance where we are at this precise moment, is a piece of work that we're doing on what we're calling real-time audit work in response to COVID-19. So one of the things that we've identified is that we are able, as a national body that works across the main public providers in Wales, to draw together and identify lessons that may be of wider benefit for the public sector to learn from. Often a crisis brings many challenges, but it also provides many opportunities. So we see this piece of work as something that we can undertake to support public bodies to identify new ways of working, consider new ways of operating their services. And by working with the individual agencies, we're looking to identify good practice, novel practice, innovative ideas in how you've responded to COVID, to share more widely to ensure that all public bodies who are dealing with this very difficult problem are able to learn from each other. So we put in place a system to collate information and capture information, and we'll be providing short narratives in real time on what we're identifying as good practice for others to learn from. So the first one went out last week on 4 lessons to learn about reopening services, and there's others to be planned throughout the remainder of the crisis. So that's just a quick update on those 2 pieces of work, and happy to take any questions members may have.
Any questions from any members?
No.
So, do we need to note everything in our report on the recommendation, Sal? Or?
Yes, I think we need to approve the statement of accounts as is detailed within the report.
So, do we have somebody you need somebody to forward it? Or?
Need someone to move, please?
Well, I'll move them.
Sorry, who was that?
I'll move them, yeah.
Councillor Spencer, second. I'll second.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so again, whether you're in favour, against or abstain, Councillor Colbrand.
In favour.
Councillor Drake.
In favour.
Councillor Evans.
Favour.
Councillor Harries.
In favour.
Councillor Hodgins.
In favour.
Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Spencer.
Favour.
Councillor White.
Favour.
And that was unanimous as well.
Well, thanks everybody for their input. Thank you for a very good report, I will say that. If we look on to item 8 then, and we're now on the internal audit report, and that's page 133.
Bear with me while I mute people again. Okay, Steen, you're unmuted now.
Okay, morning members. If I just take you through each of the reports in turn, if there are any questions, perhaps you could indicate to Sally and I could answer them at the end of each report. So we're beginning with the payment cards. So if we turn to the executive summary, so substantial assurance, so the scope of the review was to look at the arrangements for apologies. They've just decided to clean my windows. Heard me? Sorry, so for authorising paying costs incurred by the organisation for payment of cards. As you can see from the overall conclusion, well controlled, purchasing policy in place through which procedures ensure cards are issued to authorised members of staff. There are clear guidance on the use of cards and the types of transactions. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. And the types of transactions, and to ensure that transactions are authorised and the statements are reconciled in a timely manner according to segregation of duties. There are no urgent or important recommendations, just the one routine recommendation which is referred to in the management action plan. The finding was there was a difference within the purchasing card policy in terms of subsistence level, which was quoted as £25, but at different levels within the payroll policy. This was something that was already acknowledged and recognised by the service, and as you can see, the management comment is this will be actioned in the coming year. Any questions?
No, no one.
No, I am gone.
No one's indicated.
No. So if everybody's happy with that, the recommendation is that members are asked.
I think there's Steve. There's other reports as part of it.
I was going to do the recommendation. I was going to follow on then from that. It's up to you. If you want to do it all in one.
I think it's easier to do because the recommendation covers payment cards, key financial controls, and the risk management. So we do it all at the end.
All right, no worries.
Okay, so they're moving on to key financial controls. Again, reasonable assurance assessment. Members would be familiar that we undertake this audit on an annual basis. So we're looking at budget control, general ledger, cash banking and treasury management, cash flow planning, income and debtors, payments, payroll and security of assets. So overall, the conclusion was the effective segregation of duties within the key financial controls and the appropriate size of the team. And they were all found to be operating effectively according to the testing undertaken. So there are no issues in terms of substantive testing, but just one recommendation which we included as important, which is in the management action plan. as it says, we've raised this in previous years, so the financial procedures have not been reviewed and updated since 2013. Again, this is acknowledged, and there's a need to do this. We've included as priority 2 because of the timing. But I think in terms of the testing, all the procedures, all the transactions and the actions taken by staff mirror those within the current document, financial procedure rules. Any questions?
No, I think you're fine to continue.
Okay, thank you. The next one, risk management, mitigating controls. Again, members will be familiar. We undertake this audit on an annual basis. We select a number of risks from the risk register, and we look to confirm that the actions recorded against each risk for mitigating the risks are in place and being undertaken as stated within the risk register. So this year we selected liability, which is effectively high rise and response to Grenfell, proposed potential for industrial action, on-call duty system, ostensibly recruitment and retention, and also the risk of cyber attack. I think the good news is that for each of the risks, there was evidence to confirm that the actions to mitigate the risk were in place and being undertaken by each of the risk owners. The recommendations mainly relate to the use of business management information system. This is the first time we've audited risk management since the new system was implemented. So these are perhaps recommendations recognising how the system's been implemented and tried to make some improvements in regard to how the information was recorded. So turning to the management action plan. The first one, the finding, I think the finding was a number of the risk actions were projects or initiatives ongoing rather than business as usual day-to-day risk management. So explained that to management, and they've, as you can see from the management comments, they've agreed that they'll look into this. They've had a meeting and they're going to feed that back to the risk owners. So you can get a broad mix then of kind of time-bound, project-specific actions and also those that are ongoing to get a full picture of how each risk is managed. The next recommendation 2, which is a priority 3 recommendation, I think just an anomaly in terms of how the risk actions were being completed. A number were found to have 31st March 2020. I think some where that was relevant, perhaps there was a project ending at that time, but others perhaps there was something ongoing, and I think it was just an anomaly of understanding about how the new system worked and how dates should be recorded in there. And again, that's a recommendation that's been accepted and was discussed with risk owners. Any questions?
No.
Thank you. The next document is what we call our Summary of Internal Controls Assurance. This is our progress report for the year, and it's the last one of the 2019-20. And it just summarises, as you can see, as we go through the document. Paragraph 3 just shows the audits that I've just spoken about. Paragraph 4, highlight throughout the COVID-19 outbreak, we've been trying to produce digest to explain current frauds and how we might things to be aware of, and how you might act to mitigate against those frauds. The details within Appendix B, and I'll come on to those shortly. Paragraph 6, obviously there was one change to the audit plan this year. Not a change as such, there was contingency time to undertake an audit. It was agreed that sustainability review of paper usage would be undertaken. I think we brought this to members' attentions at the last audit committee. It was always planned that it would take place slightly after year end, but it's had to be postponed, obviously due to the coronavirus, but it doesn't affect the overall opinion, which is the next document I'll explain as we come on to that. So as I say, paragraph 10 explains some of the frauds and issues that are ongoing at the moment, and the fraud alerts that we've issued. They're all relevant. They're all existing frauds, but perhaps with a COVID twist, and criminals looking to exploit the situation with uncertainty, people working from home, all those kinds of things. So, sort of phony requests for email usage and passwords, phishing scams, false invoices, mandate fraud, which is requests for payment, changes to bank account details, those kinds of areas, and also employee details, requests to change employee details fraudulently. And in Annex A, you'll see all the work is completed with the exception of the contingency, which I just spoke about in paragraph 6. Any questions?
I've got a question. Well, you'll be able to answer this. Have the service seen a rise in cyber attacks since we've gone into COVID-19? That's what I'm trying to find out.
I think, I don't know whether we've seen an increase, but we regularly get many attacks every single day. Yeah. So our ICT department are permanently keeping an eye out for the different attacks and are aligned into the different ICT groups across South Wales and the UK, where various threats are shared so that the appropriate measures can be put in place.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, because I just thought we'll be targeting more now within this situation than we normally would have before, But thanks for that. Is there any other questions that any members would like to raise?
No one's indicating.
Well, if we look at the recommendation now, then, that members are asked to note internal audit recommendations and work on the internal audit action plan. So,
welcome, voiceover description.
Need someone to move?
I'll move it. I'll second. Councillor Drake will second.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Colbrand.
In favour.
In favour. Councillor Drake.
In favour.
Councillor Evans.
In favour.
Councillor Harries. Councillor Hodgins.
Favour.
Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Spencer.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor White.
In favour.
Thank you. Unanimous.
So, right then. Right. So we're on page, going to my calculations, we're on page 159, are we?
Yes, 159.
And that's the internal audit annual report year ending 31st of March 2020.
Yeah, I will just unmute people again. Okay, Steen, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Sir. So this is our annual report, which summarises the work in the year and provides an overall head of internal audit opinion for the service. As you'll see from the first page, overall, TIR is satisfied that the areas reviewed during the year, South Wales Fire and Rescue, has reasonable, effective risk management and control governance processes in place. There's a paragraph just above that in terms of COVID-19. Luckily, we were able to do the majority of the work prior to the lockdown. It's just that one item, sustainability paper usage, which we'd already intended to carry over into the next year. So the plan was to undertake 70 days of audit within the year. So we undertook 64, allowing for that one audit. Just overall, if we move to page 163, which is page 2 in our document, as you can see, 5 substantial assurance, 4 reasonable assurance, which compares fairly favourably to the previous year where there was 3 and 4, and 1 limited assurance. The number of recommendations then in the next table, that's fairly similar to previous years as well. The numbers look out of sync there. That's because of the 1 limited assurance last year, which was for fleet management, which members will remember was reported earlier in the year with a specific report. The next table, there's 2 directed recommendations and 15 compliance. That's fairly typical of all our clients. As you would appreciate, a lot of the work that we do is compliance related. so no issues there, I don't think. And in terms of operational, we've made 10 operational effectiveness matter recommendations. They're best practice, and they're areas we've identified with comparison to our other clients. Hopefully members are aware we audit across the public sector, across emergency services, central government, a whole host of public sectors. So they're all things for the organisation to think about and to try and improve where they can. Moving on to the next page, our performance, as you can see, 100% performance across each of our key performance indicators. One thing worth pointing out is that we comply with ISO 9001-2015 standards. Although our last audit was 2017, we have a compliance officer who independently checks a sample of our files and our working papers and our reports across the whole of the team, and feedback to try and make sure we meet the standards of our own quality manual, and also to make sure we provide a good service to our clients. Moving to Annex A, as you can see, most of the work undertaken according to the planned days and actual days. There was just that one contingency that wasn't used within the year. Any questions?
No, no one's indicating.
No. Oh well. The recommendation then is that members note work of the overall opinion of the internal auditors for the financial year 2019-2020. I'll second it then.
Is that seconded?
I'll second it.
Okay. So, Councillor Colbrand.
In favour.
Councillor Drake.
In favour.
Councillor Evans.
In favour.
Councillor Harries.
In favour.
Councillor Hodgins.
In favour.
Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Spencer.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor White.
In favour.
Again, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Right. If we move on to item 10 then, that's the Internal Audit Plan 2020-2021, and that's page 167.
Steen, you've muted yourself. You'll need to unmute.
I know, I'm trying.
No, Steen, sorry.
In the page. Are we on page 167, and who's got speak about that? Is it you, Sal? No, you?
No, that's Steen again, but he's on mute and I can't unmute him.
All
there
right.
we are.
You okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Excellent. So if you turn to beginning at page 169 in your pack, so this is the audit strategy and annual internal audit plan for 2020-2021. You'll see the date there. We initially put the plan together in January, so it was kind of pre-COVID. I think we always say the same thing. We'll review the plan at a 6-month point to see if it remains pertinent for yourselves, and obviously that we would have done that anyway, but that's something that we'll need to do at some point when restrictions lift, I think. But one thing to say, I'll come on to the audits that we've planned in for this year, but certainly we've got 3 planned in, which we are hoping to undertake remotely. I've started one already remotely, so no restrictions at the present time on undertaking some of the work anyway. The plan goes ahead as scheduled. So I'll turn to page 170, which is the second page, just to highlight some key emerging themes that are prevalent and had some bearing on how we formulated the plan. So key risks: workforce, continual need to ensure firefighters have the right training, particularly in light of Grenfell. Also financial and value for money. Obviously, that's an annual consideration, but also the need going forward. Audit Wales mentioned Future Generations Act, so continue need to comply with the Act and demonstrate through collaboration, partnership, working, and value for money. Operational pressures. Again, I think appreciating this, we need to ensure resilience, continuous service. We've mentioned terrorist attacks and resilience on technology, but equally now we can put in pandemic, IT security, and obviously Brexit is still there in the background as well. Turning to page 171, I wasn't intending going through the detail. Members will be familiar with how we report and the reports that come to you. Obviously, you've seen examples of that through our progress report and the annual report. The next page then is our key performance indicators. Again, you've seen those through the annual report. If we turn to page 173, this is an analysis we've put together. It reflects, each year we undertake an analysis of all the risk registers across all our client base. And this is a reproduction of what risks are most prevalent and the kind of the average score in which they're given. And I think tying these back to the services risk register, I think we've covered off most of the risks that are in the risk register. Turning to Annex B, again, members will be familiar. It's a 3-year rolling plan covering all of the key areas. So governance risk, financial systems, workforce management, states and fleet, ICT. We undertake an annual follow-up. We've also got organisational review areas, which are things that are prevalent in that year, which we've booking time to undertake reviews for. And then Annex C has the annual plan for the year. So we've, through management, discussion with management, we've identified these ones. They're partly new things or partly the rolling programme. We have some things we'll look at every 3 years and some things we'll look at annually, as I explained, in terms of key financial controls. So we've got strategic control, communications, ICT data assurance, procurement, the annual station visits, human resources management training, key financial controls, mitigating controls, and estate management delivery, plus the annual follow-up. Again, we've got another contingency item for 6 days to undertake any review that the service might deem relevant within that year. So overall, a total of 70 days audit within the year. Any questions?
Any questions of any of the members? Huh? No? Very comprehensive report then. If we look at the recommendations, if members approve the internal audit annual plan for 2020-2021, does somebody move that?
I'll move it. Councillor Drake will move it.
I'll second that, Steve.
Thank you. Sally, still there, or has she gone missing?
Sorry, I was on mute then. Okay, Councillor Colbrand.
In favour.
Councillor Drake.
In favour.
Councillor Evans.
In favour.
Councillor Harries.
Favour.
Councillor Hodgins.
In favour.
Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
In favour.
Councillor Spencer.
That's in favour.
Councillor White.
In favour.
Thank you.
There we are. Thanks everybody that went through by the time of that. If we move to item 11, which is the Forward Work Programme 2021, and it's page 183.
Yes, this is really just for members' information. It's a starter for 10 on your Forward Work Programme for the new municipal year. Obviously, we can add to it as members consider further areas that they want on the agenda, or if items get referred from Fire Authority or other committees for greater consideration.
Yeah. Members happy with the note that Forward Work Programme?
Yep.
Yep.
Great, thanks for that. No. The last item I've got is to the chairperson. I've got nothing about the rustling. On page 189.
Bear with me. No, we've got a lot of rustling. No, there are no urgent items. Councillor Hodgins is raising his hand, though.
Yeah, and see where.
Bear with me. Councillor Hodgins?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I suppose one of the priorities now for the Forward Work programme would be perhaps the social distancing thing now with the COVID in the stations, etc., wouldn't it? Because some of the stations are quite small, aren't they? I know the one in Bryn Mawr is very congested. So
I think that would flow into HR and Equalities Committee rather than the Finance Committee.
Okay, that's fine, yeah. But I suppose if there was financial implications to carry out those alterations, I suppose there would be across the boundaries there, wouldn't there?
Yeah, I think to be clear for the regulations and the guidance require the 2 metre social distancing wherever reasonably practicable. But they do accept that there will be some work situations where maintaining a 2 metre separation isn't always possible. I know certainly some of the retained stations, the guidance has been given, obviously, to have parades and drill nights outside wherever possible because it's much easier to maintain that separation. And there's also been some consideration about possibly splitting drill nights between different groups of individuals, so each local station commander is managing that appropriate to the respective workplace.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So,
Councillor White as well.
Just really in regards to COVID, really, the financial impacts on the Fire Authority. We just have some kind of briefing or some kind of report. I would imagine I know local authority to get somebody back from Welsh Government. Is that the same for the Fire Authority? Just a general report, really, of what's happening in our finances and money was being spent in regards to COVID?
Yeah, you'll have had your member updates that we send you, and I know we've been tracking through the additional expenditure that we've incurred as a consequence of COVID. I don't know whether Geraint or Chris want to add anything on that.
They've gone quiet, which is unusual for them.
They've gone quiet. We've certainly submitted our figures through to Welsh Government because they've asked for details of the additional expenditure that we've incurred. So we're waiting to hear back from Welsh Government whether they'll be covering that or not.
Yeah, still
I
waiting.
think last estimates it was in the region of about 250,000 from memory.
Yeah, the last set of figures I received was just shy of £250,000. Some of that were internal costs, sort of salaries and other bits and pieces, which we might recover from other places. But the main point is we were waiting on confirmation from Welsh Government of the sort of process really around how they would assess, complete and pay and approve, obviously, when they decide to do that.
Thank you.
Happy with that?
Yeah. So I'll add, obviously, we've captured all the costs that we incurred through the lockdown. But we're also capturing the costs now that anything that we incur sort of moving into what we call in the recovery phase. So in terms of, as I say, the social distancing, getting more people back into the workplace, there's obviously costs being incurred there as well. So we're capturing those and they wouldn't have been obviously included in the figure submitted to Welsh Government.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think Val has indicated.
Yes, if I may, please. There's for a long time now, there's been an ongoing emergency communication system that hasn't arrived, okay? That was going to encompass all the service areas. It's been a bit slow, to put it mildly. Now, there's a lot of discussion about the suppliers and the Hawaii firm. And I'm just wondering what impact, if any, that has on the eventual delivery of a system to the emergency services throughout Britain.
My understanding is because the contract's already been awarded for that emergency services network, it's that supplier who has to ensure that they can deliver against that.
Yeah,
which could mean altering whatever they've got in hand at the moment. Because if the latest directive that seemed to be coming out was you will withdraw all service from that firm, and it just, yeah, we don't know, I know, but it will be interesting to have a very short paragraph on where we go and what happens.
Okay, I can add that to the forward work programme, if that helps, to get an update report.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So shall I include it as part of the capital monitoring reports going forward? Would that be easier?
Have we got capital allocated to ESN?
Well, it's part of the capital, it's part of the programme, albeit as at the moment we get funding through Welsh Government for the revenue implications. So
Yeah.
I can capture it in the reports.
Yeah.
All right, are you happy with that, Val? Or?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, thank you.
Any other questions that any member like to raise? No? No?
I think Councillor Bradwick wants to raise something.
No, not to raise, just apologise. I had to go. I got the paint in front of my house, so he wanted the paint, so I had to leave to give him the paint to the front of the house. So sorry about that, sorry.
Yeah. Well, you haven't got any paint on you, so they must have got it right.
Yeah, he's doing a good job here for me here.
Right then, I think that's everything covered in the meeting today.
Okay, right. I will stop the recording.